Ladies and gentlemen, hi there. It is lovely to have you here. I am in Washington, D.C. That's the District of Columbia, by the way. I, I am not pretending to be any kind of an expert on this place. I haven't been here. I am not pretending to be, my normal level of knowledge about a place. But I'm thrilled to be here. And look at the sun. It just poured rain yesterday. So I'm here for a conference, right? So I have my toque on, and I sort of feel like I'm both overdressed and underdressed because it's humid here, right? So it's such a different feel. But I arrived here. I arrived here day before yesterday. Is that right? So yeah, I'm in conference starting at noon today, and then going to Wednesday. And then I'm going to visit some Hegel people here, which is really fun. So I am just south, but look at this gorgeous, gorgeous blue sky. So Washington, D.C., and like I say, I'm not pretending to be an expert by any stretch, but I arrived day before yesterday. I didn't land till about 10:30, and then I took the train in. Very simple process, and I came in and I stayed in town, and then I met a friend of mine yesterday, and we went to the National Museum of African American of Culture and History, and super important. I feel as though I'd like to write maybe a piece about it. We spent 2 hours there, and it was basically 2 hours, of course, of discussing enslavement and the history of, I mean, we could line up all the crimes against humanity, but the 12.5 million people who were taken as chattel slaves um, from Africa across the Americas. I know most of that history, and that's not something to necessarily brag about, but it's important. The one thing I learned that I did not know yesterday is in 1808, the American Congress uh, outlawed the importation of enslaved people. And you think that's quite a progressive move, but what it meant is that people were then bred and children were taken away from their parents and sold for another, well, I guess 58 years. So, pretty shocking history. So I went to the Museum of African American Culture and History yesterday. I could have easily spent another 2 hours. I was with a friend who works as a writer at the Washington Post, and just a deeply interesting and informed person. And it was interesting as we were walking back to the car after, we're saying, um, if we're going to talk about heavy things after 2 hours of slavery, it's pretty important. So I think so. The District of Columbia, of course, is this little area. I Googled it, and it is roughly the same size in area as Easter Island, Rapa Nui. Um, Oddly enough, I measure everything against Easter Island because I've been there 5 times, and the size of it matters. Of course, the layout of the city is based on the layout of Versailles, and it does feel that way. But if you have to get the sense of where I am, there's a lot of statues to like dead white men around here. But if you want to have a sense of where I am, check this out. There is behind me, I very intentionally walked over here. That is, ladies and gentlemen, the White House. Uh, the home of the American president. The only American president who didn't live there, apparently, was actually George Washington. Um, considered, of course, a hero in so many ways. At the time of his death, he owned 500 people. Um, so, hey, one has to be pretty honest about these kind of things. But I walked right up Pennsylvania Avenue. These are things we all hear about. Literally, it is interesting to me for the amount that I travel the world. I've only been to DC. I think I was here as a child, but I've only been here as an adult one other time. I actually came here on a tour years ago that started in Atlanta, Georgia, and finished up here. And I remember staying an extra 2 days just to go to the museums. And it's interesting. So it's really kind of a square, right along the Potomac River. Potomac. I wanted to go plunge in there this morning, but I didn't know how to get there. And and it's an interesting place. It's about 750,000 people. But the greater area, of course, it's urbanized all the way up to Baltimore and then over on the Virginia side. So, it's part of this urban conglomeration here of, 3 million or so. But because I'm over on the east side of the United States of America right now, it's fascinating to me because from here, if you follow the line up to Boston, there's about 130 or 140 million people, right? It's the biggest, densest population anywhere on Turtle Island in North America here. And that's sort of one big strip. So it's a fascinating place. So I guess I probably have to show you, I'm presuming, and again, I apologize for my lack of expertise, but that looks a lot like George Washington to me, but I know it isn't. Oh, that's Lafayette. So Lafayette actually came here even in his waning days. You know that the American War of Independence actually bankrupted France, and you can draw a direct line from that to the French Revolution. So even though France was, an incredibly oppressive system leading up to their revolution, they supported democracy in the United States, but they did so, of course, to defeat Britain rather than, of course, any great values. But check it out. There's the Washington Memorial. And you know what? 1884, I think it was finished. We walked up and looked at it yesterday. We could have even gone up, but it was such a foggy day. But look at this gorgeous day here. So there is the house of the American president. Now, I'd love to walk around because they have a big menorah out front for Hanukkah, and I would love to be able to show that. I didn't know what the rules would be walking around it, but pretty cool to be down here. So that's the Treasury Department. Goodness me, that's pretty cool. The United States Department of the Treasury, under the provisions of the Historic Sites Act, August 21st, 1935, the site possesses exceptional value in commemorating or illustrating the history of the United States. Well, that's pretty cool. So one of our fun games, right? The United States, of course, becomes an independent country in 1776. That really goes on until 1784, and there were 13 colonies, Delaware being the first. But does anyone know what the 14th colony was? Because people think of these 13 colonies declaring independence, but there were a lot more, right? Nova Scotia never did side with the United States. Upper and Lower Canada, Ontario, Quebec, didn't. But the 14th state to join was actually Vermont, the Green Mountain State, the Bernie Sanders state, and they had the right, and they still have the right, to actually secede from the Union if they wanted to. So that's kind of interesting. But when they built the White House, and I think, everything can be criticized, and I think that's significant. Private tour would be awesome. Everything can be criticized, but one of the things that the American Constitution and George Washington in particular did is, of course, they left power and they founded something, and I realized this was put deeply under threat on January 6th, 2020. But the fact that there is this transition for over 200 years, 250 years, the fact that government will change over and people don't make themselves a monarch is part of the reason for the incredible success of this country and this nation. And that is an important reality, and it says a lot, and it's important to protect that because the United States, as much as everyone can criticize things, this is still the biggest economy in the world. It is still the pillar of democratic rights and constitutional rights. I'm going to call that Art Deco. I don't know if I'm being very honest about that. It's sort of more Renaissance. Do you know, I'm just down the road of quite a few people I know as well. I have a couple of very dear friends in Norfolk, Virginia, and I gather that's about 3 hours away. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to do what this young man's doing here. I'm going to go out for a jog. It's a tourism conference, Kathy. So it's, I think there's 10 of us Canadians here, but it's mostly folks from the States. But I was invited down, and I'm not presenting or anything. I'm just here. It's kind of a thank you for service with a company, and so I just took the opportunity to come here. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Now I have to get a little Canadian on you here. The War of 1812, which of course happened in 1814, but let's not split hairs. And that was the war between, people say, Canada and the United States, but it wasn't, because Canada didn't exist as a country at that point. But the Americans went up and burnt York to the ground. York was Toronto. And then the British militia, Canadian militia, came down here and burnt the house of the U.S. president. And to cover up the burn marks, they painted it white. Ergo, the White House. There is the Capitol building out there. So there is the Capitol building. What a spectacular day, because it really wasn't a gorgeous day at all. So the National Mall, so there's the Washington Memorial, and behind it's the Lincoln Memorial. I mean, these are all things, we've all seen these on films. I honestly am like a kid in a candy store here, because I just have not spent, for all the travel I do around the world, I've spent so little time in Washington, D.C., and it's just so significant. Now, there's loads of statues. 99% of them seem to be like white dudes. So that's kind of, its own thing. Down on the right in the distance is the World War II Memorial, which I heard is just really moving. So there's a gentleman here looking for a little money. It's not very much, but thank you. But yeah, so I'm down by the White House, obviously. So there's three pillars. I'm not going to the Arlington Centenary. I literally, like, starting at noon today, I'm in meetings for 2.5 days. But then when our dear friend Karen comes to me, I'm in their hands. I think we're going to go to West Virginia, because I have never set foot in West Virginia. I need to add it up. I think I'm at 35 U.S. states, I think. So that would be just kind of a cool thing. And they're up the road for Shenandoah. But there we are. I just have to frame this for everyone. There is the White House, ladies and gentlemen. And it is fitting of such a massive democracy as this country is. There's the great quota, House divided, Lincoln. Now, I did want to have a quick conversation, because we did have a conversation about Lincoln yesterday. 1863, sorry, it's a bit noisy here. They passed the Emancipation Proclamation, which is very significant. Basically, the end of enslavement, the single greatest crime, I think, in human history. And we can line our crimes up, no problem. But also, 3 days after that, Lincoln brought about the slaughter of indigenous people at Wounded Knee in the west of the United States. And so, like everything, there's so much to unpack with this history. And that just gives me pause to step back and talk a little bit about the city itself. Because, again, not being particularly familiar with it, but I read some of the demographics. This is, and one of the things I sort of knew, but I learned yesterday in the African American Museum, this is, in sort of a more northern sense, the blackest of the American cities, and was quite early on a distinctly African American city. So the ethnic mix here, from my point of view, is super cool. Obviously, as I live in Western Canada, our influences come much more from Asia, parts of the world. Here, last night I had some dinner, and the fellow who was serving was from Azerbaijan, from Baku, and so we had this great conversation. We actually spoke Turkish together. He spoke fluent Turkish, much better than mine. Really neat kind of mix. It is super international. It is very expensive, and as my dollar, of course, is down at 73 cents US, everything is crazy expensive, but that's okay, because they're going to feed me at this conference. It's when I moved to this time of year, and I just got a call. Now, this is the Commerce Department over here. Look at this. I mean, it's just all empire architecture, as one would expect. And the layout of the city is fantastic. So it's not a grid, so it doesn't have that Spanish feel at all. I say the same design as Versailles in France. And so it has that feel. Harper's Ferry, yeah. Robert, sorry, I'm missing the chat. I've got the sun right in my eyes, everyone. and so I'm not seeing a great deal. But I want to come down. But oh, actually, do you know I didn't even intend to walk this way, but now that I'm here, um, the building coming up on the left is the African American Museum. And so when I was last here, I spent 2 days just doing Smithsonian and, of course, the Holocaust Museum. And I remember saying, and I said to my friend yesterday, I maybe wasn't affected as much by the Holocaust Museum as I would have thought I would. But then I grew up with so much of that history that it wasn't. Uh, I guess it's so important. I do think anyone who wants to rewrite history, or let's say ban books, and I am winking at Ron DeSantis and those people down there. I think every one of those people has to come and go through these different museums. And when you go into this one down here, you go to the bottom floor, and that was the advice I was given upon arrival. And say we spent 2 hours down there, and we could have spent more. And again, I talk about this history all the time. The history of monetization in the Americas, so much. But when you actually look at, so in 1900, the United States was 98 million people. 9.5% were African American, overwhelmingly in the Deep South, living in extreme rural poverty. Obviously, the people who did stand up during the Civil War to fight against, people try and say it's states' rights. Well, states' rights to choose what? Well, to choose enslavement. Right? It's very significant. And every time you climb into this history of what was the peculiar institutions, they call it, it's always worse than you think it was. It's always more overwhelming. The absolute shocking disregard for humanity. And of course, I try not to trespass on people's belief systems, but remember, the Bible gets slavery wrong, right? But chattel slavery, 15 to 30% of people expired before they were loaded on the ships, and another 30% died on the ships as they came over before they were abused, whipped, raped, and that produced, apparently leading up to the 1860s, upwards of 60% of the gross domestic product of the United States. So allow yourself to sit back and learn from that, because it really is as meaningful and as important as one would think. And I dreamt about it last night. And like I say, I like to think I know this history. I also, as a settler Canadian, I also want to be very honest about, the privilege that I was born into. And I think all these people trying to rewrite history need to come up and walk through these places and read every single panel and start to learn what it was built on. So that is the weighty conversation, and one should never back away from that. On the other hand, we should always step up and acknowledge the fact that as much as people like to criticize the United States, thank goodness for the health of this democracy and the fact that it is. So this Washington Memorial, you can actually see a line down the middle of it. It took, I guess, years and years to complete. But I sort of feel like every time I see this thing in real person, I've seen it so often in films. And, I'm one of these very, very fortunate people who gets to travel the world so much. But you come to a city like this, and these are just images that we all see all the time. There's academia buses. So when I've done tours in New York, I've always used that bus company. And they're lovely people. It's kind of fun to see. I just haven't gotten back to this part of the world for a long time. So I'm going to walk out here and try and give you a lovely perspective down towards the White House. Oh, look at this. So I really don't know what's going on with this helicopter, but fascinating to see. So the Capitol building, by the way, it was so interesting at the African American Museum to see the crowds that were there for the inauguration of Barack Obama in 2008. which incidentally, apparently, were actually more people than came for Trump's, despite despite the fake news out there. But that's pretty significant. So to be in this huge mall, I really do think I'm going to have to get up early tomorrow and go for a jog, just kind of on principle, because whenever you watch those other films of the yeah, like the what was that called, House of Cards? I watched the first couple seasons before uh, the star Kevin Spacey, is that his name? Turned out to be a horrible person. Um, you see them going out for their morning jog. Pretty cool thing to see. Now, the big buildings out in the distance over there are across the Potomac, and that's over in Virginia. So I do feel like, my kid's not been here. I feel like this would be a place to come down for 4 or 5 days just to visit these sites. Everything is well done. And the other thing, and I mean this is a real hug and a compliment to all of my American friends, and it's not that I forget it, but Americans are just so friendly. Like, everyone is nice. They honk a lot driving here. That's been interesting to me. But people are just so nice all the time. Service is so good. People are warm and kind. It's just such a nice place to come to. And of course, you can speak, a dozen languages in an hour here if you want to. So I'm trying to frame, I don't think it's going to work very well. I was trying to frame the White House down there, but the trees, even though we're, of course, well into December, the short days here, but we're a long ways out. Check out the shadow that is coming off this watch. So there is, as I get around between the trees, you will see the national menorah out there for Hanukkah. And, of course, the United States, well, there's only one country in the world where the majority of the population is Jewish, and we all know that's Israel. And Israel is having a very, very tough time at the moment. But of course, the Jewish tradition here is really important. And some of you joined me last year. I was in Newport, Rhode Island, which is the oldest synagogue in the United States. And there's a letter published out front of it from George Washington about people's rights to practice their faith. And I think that's pretty significant. So hopefully you're able to see that in the image out there. The sun is just so bright out here. It is a big city. It is expansive. I see there's a big reef around. We just need peace. Well, we do need peace. And we also need, the right for at least one country in the world to have a majority Jewish population. And that's pretty significant. Now, big memorial down here in the distance. So I'm happy to just keep walking for a little while. Oh, by the way, there's the Lincoln Memorial down there in the distance. And then Jefferson's off in the distance. I don't know how many of you are fans of Christopher Hitchens. I lament his loss deeply. He was such a witty person. We disagreed on the invasion of Iraq, but he used to be a great fan of Jefferson. And as he said, he could never admit he was wrong, but he said his thinking was evolving as he sort of realized that he believed, of course, in this kind of independent person, king independence sort of thing, and he moved away from that belief system. These helicopters are fascinating to me. I don't know if that is maybe, I don't know, is that the president? Come on, let's pretend. Let's just stand here and I'll say that I'm biding my time. Come on, that was witty. But how cool is this? I've got it's the Jefferson, excuse me. Yeah. The round one's Jefferson, and then, but the Lincoln, oh, look. So, birds, those are going to be cowbirds. Check this out. That, you know what? Yeah, I say that is the president's helicopter. Is that the president? I think so. I think how cool is that? I say we're all biding our time here. Yeah, I thought you'd get that. Look at that, everyone. I am just, if I were to run over and run up and shake his hand, do you think anyone would stop? I don't think so. I think he'd say, "Hey, welcome to the States." Um, that, sorry, everyone. I'm not, I'm not really into hero worship or anything, but so my mom's kind of my stepdad, um, Bernie Shore, who passed away 6 months after my dad did. So, my son lost two granddads in a 6 month period. He always thought that Biden was just a good person, and Bernie was an extremely good person, and so I always kind of took that advice. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm going to be able to get any closer, but well, there's another helicopter behind me. Sorry, I was going to walk over to the warm oil, but I'm going to have to just try and see if I can get any closer here, because I would just be so cool. I just, I've been to the Canadian Parliament so many times. Well, Robert's walked around there with me, and I've seen lots of MPs. But I mean, you're talking about the leader of the most powerful country in the world here. It is just landed, so I timed all this. Like I very intentionally planned this to get the helicopter coming in. So I don't know if you're on big screens. Um, if you're on big screens, you might be able to see this. I don't with my bare eyes. I'm able to see it. I don't know through my phone. I'm not, but the helicopter has landed right in front. So I guess we're not going to see a great deal, but just how cool is that? But there it is. I guess we're not going to see him or them or whoever is coming out. For those of you who don't know, so Michelle, and not to tell your story, Michelle, but Michelle lives in Germany, but she works with American Defense. If you find that aggressive, I don't want you to be too defensive. Sorry, but it's just so fascinating. Yeah, so there it is out in the distance. I think what I'll do now is I'm going to walk up around to the left. I was going to head to the Korean Memorial. It's interesting. I was in Korea just a few years ago, and and I wasn't. It was just before we were doing the virtual tours. I would love to go back and do that again. Just loved Korea, but it's fascinating here. So I guess I'll get us up closer to the National Menorah up there. Finn has been lighting his candles. Dad's jokes in DC. There's a couple here. Thanks. So the whole street is closed off. How cool is? I don't know if I'm allowed. I guess I'm allowed to walk over. Sorry, everyone. This isn't my normal level of expertise here, but gentleman's got a Secret Service thing on. I feel like I want to ask him if that's the president landing, but I don't know if I'm welcome to do that or not. Although it is something important to say, this is the people's house. These leaders of these countries are not monarchs. They are elected officials, and they are there by the grace of the population, which is very significant. Look at this light over here. It is just so iconic. Isn't that fantastic? I hope you're able to take some nice pictures. So, well, the land of freedom, and freedom is, of course, a hotly contested concept, and it's important. But at least these debates happen here, and I am walking up in front of the residence of the president of the most powerful country in the world, and I'm allowed to do that, and I think that stands for a lot. And also, as a neighbor and a friend to this country, as a Canadian, of course we have cultural differences, but like I was saying a little bit earlier, everyone is just so nice, and I think the rest of the world can take a little bit of a cue from that. It's so easy to criticize, but the warmth and the friendliness that you find in a country that is built on diversity and immigration is really important. Now, I've got one other museum that I need to see here. There is a Native American museum, which I have also not visited. So I'm going to have to come back. And I knew this was going to happen when I came here. So here is the second division over here. Now, Mary Beth is here, my dear friend, and we were in June visiting her uncle's grave in Normandy. And this is talking about, well, it says the Rhine. I'm presuming that the second division is what we're talking about, the Battle of Boyne, and I apologize for not having all my stats together on that, but it is just so significant and important. I'm interested that they've closed down the road here. So obviously with the president arriving, obviously important. Also, I need to know the history. I did ask my friend yesterday, but she didn't know. There's a little stone house there, or maybe she didn't tell me, but looks like an old gatehouse. It's got to be one of the oldest buildings here in all of DC. It's just such a fantastic little building there on the corner. So listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna, I guess, have to get back and go to this conference and listen to speeches and all sorts of things. But I'm gonna have a great time, and I'm gonna catch up with a few people that I know. There's apparently about 150 or 160 people, but I will know a few people, and that's gonna be fun and meaningful. And I'm so happy to be here, and I'm happy the sun has come out because it was just, like I say, it was just pouring rain yesterday. And so little rain where I come from. Of course, it falls with snow. If anyone needs a hand, you can have a glove there. But they say no glove, no love. Food trucks everywhere as well. What a neat, interesting, and diverse city. So for all of my American friends, thank you for welcoming me back to your beautiful, beautiful country. Oh, I like these hippie shirts. I went past a bus stop yesterday that had the national debt counting out on it. I'm not going for the hot dog, by the way. I fell off the vegetarian wagon because it's easier not to be here, but it's fun to do that. So the Organization of American States. Oh, do you know what, everyone? That is the OAS. Canada joined in 1993. It was the last country to join the OAS, the Organization of American States. And of course, these are the two continents, or three, as one could argue: Turtle Island, Central America, South America. And it's an organization that I'm a huge fan of. And we are not the New World because people have lived here as long as they've lived everywhere else. But what a cool building to come and see. You see, every corner here could actually just erupt in some sort of talk of history or importance. But there we are, the OAS. I actually considered working for them at one point. All right, ladies and gentlemen, listen, thank you so much for my joining me for my kind of rambling around here. Like I say, I said in the description, I'm not out to be an expert on this by any stretch. I will be meeting friends who are licensed guides here today. And when I say friends, there's at least one person who I know who has their license for here. And so that'll be kind of cool. There's another, I thought it was the Guatemalan flag, but it's clearly not, but a blue and white flag. So thank you for sharing with me, everyone.